The eerily quiet international airport in Johannesburg. Just a few passengers praying they can leave. As nations around the world close their doors to South Africa or impose strict quarantine rules as they have in the UK, a warning was sounded today. In an exclusive interview with Channel 4 News, a leading professor of vaccinology accused these countries of preventing the very collaboration needed to deal with the new COVID variant, Omicron.
When those flights are infrequent, it basically hampers your ability to scale up your research, which is exactly what we need to do. And in fact, it's also disadvantageous to the collaborations we set up. So we're needing to export, in fact, virus as well as samples to collaborators for them to do their part of the work.
10 southern African countries are on the UK's red list, meaning visitors will have to pay to go into a quarantine hotel on arrival. Last time South Africa was cut off from international travel, they struggled in accessing vital ingredients, including reagents, critical for testing for COVID-19. Now scientists fear this will happen again. South Africa was the first to report the emergence of a variant with an abnormal number of mutations 6 days ago. It was from a specimen collected on the 9th of November from Botswana. And yet in the mystery that remains behind this variant, the Dutch health authority said today that Omicron was already in the country when South Africa reported it to the WHO. Cases are rising sharply along with hospitalizations in South Africa's Gauteng province, although a briefing yesterday said they currently appear to be mild and mainly in the unvaccinated. But once again, this has shone a light on vaccine inequity. Data shows that 20 countries have vaccination rates of less than 3% of their populations, and all but 2 of those countries are in Africa, with Burundi, for instance, having fully jabbed fewer than 800 of its almost 12 million residents. Not all of it is to do with supply. Conflict in infrastructure and hesitancy are also causing problems. Professor Mahdi said misinformation also fed into the chasm left by the delayed rollout.
By the time these vaccines become available, your back is against the wall in terms of fighting this misinformation. So I think that's one of the major driving factors. But I do believe another major problem that we're experiencing, certainly in South Africa, and I believe that this will be the case for most of the rest of Africa, is the issue of apathy.
It is still unclear about vaccine efficacy against Omicron, but the UK is pressing ahead with a massive booster rollout. All adults to be offered the jab by the end of January, on the understanding they will provide some protection.
Today, our position is and always will be immeasurably better than it was a year ago. What we're doing is taking some proportionate precautionary measures while our scientists crack the Omicron code.
And more cases of the virus have been reported in the UK today, though still in the low 20s.
The recent cases that we've confirmed today, we're not able to say whether or not, at this point, because we don't know. We're doing that work right now at speed to determine whether they all have a link to South Africa or not. Is there likely to be community transmission? I think we have to be realistic. There is likely to be, as we're seeing in other European countries. And also, as I said earlier, that we would expect cases to rise as we now actively look for cases.
Brighton racecourse today, and they were queuing for their boosters. The time between shots now reduced from 6 to 3 months.
I just wanted it done as soon as possible anyway, and now I've hit the criteria. It means that I can come here and get sorted out.
Obviously, it is a different variant, so it's quite worrying, but I think it's, reason we're up here today, if you can get all your boosters or your first jab or your second jab or whatever, we do our best to combat it, really. So, I think as long as everyone's sensible.
It was announced today, too, that the army will be drafted in along with volunteers to help jab the population, with the target 14 million boosters.
Victoria MacDonald. Well, this afternoon, the Commons approved the government's new emergency COVID regulations that came into force this morning for England, but some Conservative MPs expressed fury at the new rules. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, joins us now from Westminster. Gary.
As you say, MPs got the chance to vote on the regulations 12 hours retrospectively after they came in, and there was a Tory rebellion. 32 Tory MPs it got as high as in the second of these votes, rebelling against the COVID regulations. We can't really tell how many abstentions, but there could be quite a few. Not a huge turnout in there today. They were particularly angry about not just the masking regulations, but the isolation regulations being put in there to defend us against the new variant. And they worry that these are going to shut down businesses and schools across England. Here's a flavour of some of those Tory rebels speaking.
We're looking at a pingdemic that's going to devastate education again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and after everything that we've learned.
This is a fundamental choice, I would say, between heading towards heaven and heading towards hell. If we continue to react to these fears and uncertainties by taking the authoritarian course without impact assessments, because they're only temporary, you know, then we are embarked on that downward course.
Quite dramatic language, as you can hear, and quite a few Tory MPs that I spoke to after that vote were saying that it's all very well for the Prime Minister to say don't cancel Christmas parties. People only hear the last 3 words, one MP said. And there were also a bit of mixed messaging coming from other bits of Whitehall today, because Jenny Harries, quite a figure in press conferences through the COVID saga, now Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency, talked about how people should reduce their socialising. The Prime Minister came back in his press conference and said, well, no, that isn't our message. Labour, meanwhile, is putting out a slightly different message. They want a tightening of the regulations on travel. They want people not just to take PCR tests if they come to this country and have landed, the laboratory tests, but they want them to take a lateral flow before they depart the country they're coming from, because Labour is saying that these flights from certain areas are in great danger in departure lounges, on the flight itself, of becoming super spreader events.
Gary Gibbon.